So June 28th, 2018, a private plane on a test flight literally falls out of the sky over Mumbai, crashing right into a neighborhood in Ghatkopar. But listen, this was not just some tragic, ordinary accident. It wasn't just a simple mechanical failure or a case of pilot error.
No, not at all. This was the final, devastating chapter in a story that really started a decade earlier. It's a story filled with shortcuts, a really suspicious accident downgrade, questionable repairs, and a system that completely failed to protect the very people it was meant to serve. When you really dig into it, it starts to look a whole lot less like an accident and a whole lot more like a crime.
And hey, don't just take our word for it. A parliamentary investigation dug into this, and what they found was so disturbing they used words like shocking, illegal, and criminal negligence to describe what went down. They weren't just looking at a crash, they were uncovering a deep systemic rot.
Exactly. Okay, let's really get into this, because what that committee found and what aviation experts like Captain Amit Singh have been pointing out suggests this whole tragedy wasn't just preventable. No, it was the predictable, inevitable result of a long chain of very deliberate and very dangerous decisions.
Before we go any further, it is so important to remember the human cost here. 5 people lost their lives that day. You had the pilot, Captain Pradeep Rajput, the co-pilot, Captain Maria Zuberi, 2 brilliant aircraft maintenance engineers, Saurabhi Gupta and Manish Pandey, and an innocent pedestrian on the ground, Govind Pandey.
And these aren't just names on a report, you know? These were professionals, they were mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. And as you're going to see, the evidence really suggests the pilots fought tooth and nail to save lives on the ground right up until the very end. And the engineers, well, they might have been on a flight they should have never been on in the first place. Their deaths weren't a statistic. They were the direct consequence of a massive chain of failures.
So right away, the investigation started raising huge red flags about the flight itself. See, this wasn't some regular commercial flight. This was something that should have been under even tighter scrutiny, a test flight. The very first time this plane was going up after being grounded and heavily repaired for years.
Just think about that for a second. The single most dangerous, most unpredictable moment in a repaired aircraft's life, and the circumstances around it were, to put it lightly, completely and totally unacceptable.
Now, this was supposed to be a flight test. That's a very specific operation with crystal clear rules. No passengers, right? Only the absolute essential crew you need to fly the plane and watch its systems. The whole point is to be cautious, to be in a controlled environment, and to make sure the aircraft works exactly like it's supposed to.
But take a look at this footage. I know it's grainy, but it shows something absolutely chilling that experts noticed right away. The propellers, they don't look like they're spinning. And later, photos from the crash site showed the propeller blades were mostly straight, not all bent and twisted like you'd expect if they were turning with power at impact. This points to a total loss of engine power. That plane was basically just a glider.
And the parliamentary committee, wow, they found this flight just shredded the rule book. First off, it was flying in torrential rain, really bad weather, which is an absolute no-go for any kind of test flight. You have to have clear visibility.
Second, it was carrying 2 aircraft maintenance engineers. They're ground crew. They have no business being on a test flight. And maybe the most chilling part? The committee report notes that the families of the deceased crew said they were pushed into the aircraft forcefully.
And if all that wasn't enough, it was flying over Ghatkopar, one of the most crowded places in all of Mumbai. Test flights are supposed to happen over empty areas for this exact reason. This wasn't just cutting a corner. This flight was illegal on so many levels before its wheels even left the ground.
Now, to really understand why this flight was so unbelievably risky, you have to look at the plane's history. This aircraft, registration VT-UPZ, wasn't just any old plane. It was basically a ghost from a previous accident, brought back to life under some seriously sketchy circumstances.
And right here, this is where the story truly begins. The seeds of this Ghatkopar crash, they were planted 10 years earlier, with a decision that just seems designed to hide the truth about how badly damaged this plane really was.
So back in February 2008, this exact same plane crash-landed at Allahabad airport. The damage was huge, the belly was ripped open, the wings were smashed up. I mean, by any definition, it was an accident. Its airworthiness certificate was suspended on the spot.
But here's the kicker, the really critical detail. Sources say that DGCA officials, for reasons we still don't know, officially downgraded this event from an accident to a serious incident. Now, that's not just playing with words. Downgrading it meant way less scrutiny, way less paperwork, and it made the wrecked plane a lot easier to sell later. It was the first step in a cover-up. The plane was then just left to rot for almost 10 years. The parliamentary report literally called it a piece of scrap when it was finally sold in 2016.
And that certificate of airworthiness, the C of A, that got suspended, that's not just some bureaucratic form. It's the legal and technical stamp of approval from the DGCA that says, yes, this aircraft is fit to fly safely. Without a valid C of A plane is just a big, heavy collection of metal parts.
Right. The moment its C of A was suspended in 2008, it legally stopped being an aircraft that could fly. It was a grounded machine. To bring it back from that required a super rigorous, painstaking process to prove it was safe again, a process designed to prevent exactly what ended up happening in Ghatkopar.
And look, this process is incredibly strict for a very simple reason. There is no guesswork in aviation safety. You can't just slap some patches on a plane and take it for a joyride. For a major repair on a damaged aircraft like this, the owner has to first submit a detailed repair plan to the DGCA and get it approved.
Then they do the work. And after that, and this is key, they have to go back to the DGCA with a completion report proving everything was done by the book. Only after the DGCA physically goes and verifies that the work was done according to that sanctioned plan can they even think about issuing a special flight permit for a test. Every single step is a vital, non-negotiable safety gate.
But here it is. This is the most damning finding from the whole parliamentary report. UI Aviation and their maintenance partner, Indamar, they just skipped the most critical step of all.
Yep, they got the initial repair plan signed off, but they never went back to the DGCA with the completed work. They never let the regulator do the final physical check. They basically just decided for themselves that a plane that was once called scrap, that sat on the ground for a decade, was ready to fly, and they took it up into the sky over one of the most crowded cities on Earth.
You know, this whole pattern of sidestepping regulators, of thinking you know better than the rules, it's not unique to this one crash in India. It's a playbook for disaster that we have seen played out time and time again, all over the world, with absolutely devastating consequences.
It's this culture where safety is seen as, well, not as a necessity, but as an expensive inconvenience. And the watchdog, the regulator, whose entire job is to enforce those rules, is either asleep at the wheel, complicit, or has been deliberately kept in the dark.
I mean, we saw the exact same dynamic with the Boeing 737 MAX disasters. In that case, Boeing basically deceived its own regulator, the FAA, about how a new flight control system called MCAS really worked. They made these incorrect and ultimately fatal assumptions about how pilots would react to it.
They hid critical information from the watchdog. And what was the result? 2 brand new planes fell out of the sky, killing 346 people. It's the same fundamental failure. The people being regulated hide information or just ignore the process. And the result is tragedy.
And this goes way beyond aviation. Think about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The investigation there found that BP had this deeply ingrained corporate culture of just cutting costs and ignoring safety procedures to chase profits.
Or the Grenfell Tower fire in London, which killed 72 people. That was caused by using cheaper, flammable materials on the outside of the building, a fact that was covered up for years. In every single one of these cases, the story is the same. Safety is just an obstacle to get around, and the regulators don't step in until it is far, far too late.
And that brings us right back to Ghatkopar, because after they established that the flight was illegal and the procedures were ignored, the parliamentary committee was left asking some really pointed questions about accountability.
Right. If the rules were broken so obviously, why didn't anybody stop it? And who is actually responsible for the 5 people who died? Because, believe me, the story gets even murkier after the crash.
This was the committee's first and most basic question, and they were just stunned. How in the world does an aircraft with a suspended certificate of airworthiness that hasn't gotten its final sign-off from the DGCA get permission to take off from a major international airport like Mumbai?
Where was air traffic control? Where were the airport authorities? It just points to a complete catastrophic breakdown, not just inside the company, but in the entire aviation oversight ecosystem. Somebody somewhere should have had a checklist that this flight failed, but that plane took off anyway.
And then you've got the aftermath. The families of the victims told the committee about their profound pain. Despite all these clear illegalities, the uncertified plane, the crew being forced on board, the bad weather flight, a formal police investigation wasn't even started with a standard FIR.
It is baffling, and frankly, it's suspicious. There are reports that crucial evidence was moved from the crash site, that the official report statements about the plane's flaps and landing gear don't even match the photos, that a standard test for determining engine speed and turboprop crashes, it's called spectroscopy, was just not done. Why? It all points to a conscious effort to control the story, maybe to protect some people, and blame the dead pilots who couldn't speak for themselves.
Then, the committee found the money trail, and that just raised even more questions. The plane, this grounded airframe that the parliamentary report itself called scrap, was bought for 1.4 crore rupees.
But get this, it was insured for 7 crore rupees. That's 5 times what they paid for it. The committee was just floored. How can an aircraft with a suspended C of A, which is technically worthless as a flying machine, be valued so high for insurance? It raises some deeply uncomfortable questions about the financial motives that were at play in getting this plane airborne, no matter the human cost.
In the end, the committee's conclusion was damning and crystal clear. They said that while the company and the maintenance organization went ahead illegally, the regulators, the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the DGCA, cannot just wash their hands of their responsibility.
Their entire job is to be the final check, the gatekeeper. And their failure started all the way back in 2008 when they downgraded that first accident, and it ended in 2018 when they failed to stop this illegal flight from ever taking off. The system didn't just have a crack in it, it was fundamentally broken.
And that just leaves us with this one final haunting question. When a whole system fails, who really pays the price? The owner? UA Aviation. The repair shop? Indomare. The regulator? The DGCA. The airport authorities, the police. You've got all these players who had a role in the chain of events that led to this crash.
The committee called it criminal negligence. Analysts point to a conspiracy to save the powerful by blaming the dead. But when it all settles, who is truly held responsible? In the end, the only ones who paid the ultimate price were the 5 people who lost their lives on a flight that should never, ever have left the ground.